if you had hoped and prayed that the Philadelphia Flyers were going to do something, and that smile, like good luck, was going to smile on them, there was going to be good fortune. It didn't happen tonight, and I don't know how all of you felt out there, but it just kind of felt like this all along was going to go the way of the Flyers sticking at 7, maybe even falling to 8, and that Chicago was going to get the top pick. And this is something that we talked about on Snow the Goalie a ton this year. You know, when you go into a year and it's clear that your team is not good enough, you have two choices if you are the executive of a team. You can lean into that and you can be a bad team, or you can try to play the middle. And, you know, Chuck Fletcher's gone. And so, you know, you can't continue to beat the dead horse. But in this case, you can, because his sins and what he did at the start of this year is ultimately what cost the Philadelphia Flyers any semblance of being able to do anything in this draft lottery. And it's a shame. And when you look at it now, you have to kind of sit back and say to yourself, you know, this is almost the price that you pay. Chicago getting the top pick is the least surprising thing. If you followed this league in any capacity over the last however many years, it just feels like Chicago gets all the luck. They're not the only team, but they're certainly one of the teams. It doesn't matter that their franchise was effectively a disgrace, a disaster, that there were all kinds of sexual assault allegations. I mean, the hockey gods don't punish for that. But here we are. The Blackhawks went out of their way to tank this season. Now, you could say I'm an asshole, and I am. That is fair. When it comes to the Flyers and what they have been the last few years, I will be the resident asshole. But I did say consistently for the better part of 2 years now, this team is not good enough. At some point, you have to blow it up in some capacity, and you have to race to the bottom. Chicago did that. Now, did Chicago end up with the best odds to potentially win the draft lottery? No. But this is where we come back to that notion that, you know, when you're trying to get to the bottom, when you're trying to get in position to get the top pick in the draft, you need to put yourself in position where you can't be leapfrogged by many teams. Now, you can look at this and say, well, not that many teams leapfrogged, right? The only thing that changed is that Columbus fell, Chicago jumps. Okay, fine. Like that is true. That is accurate. But when you're the Flyers and you lie to yourself and you lie to your fan base throughout the summer, like Chuck Fletcher did, and even into the fall and into December, when you do that consistently and you put yourself in position to be the 7th worst team, you have opened yourself up to not really having much of a shot to finish with one of those top 4 picks. Now, how good each of those 4 players are going to be, that varies. It varies by scout. It varies by pundit. But there are 4 players who are legitimately star caliber players. Now, if you're the Flyers, the only thing that you can hope and pray for at this point is maybe Mishkov falls to 7. But if we're being honest, I don't know what you do. If you're Danny Briere, you've now been given carte blanche. John Tortorella is effectively, been given the most control and power of any coach in the league. And maybe you sit back and say, we can afford to whiff on number 7 if it means we take a swing for the fences if Mishkov's there. And then we come back to it, if 2-3 years down the line, he's still under contract in the KHL and he never comes over. You come back and say, well, that was the moment. That was the pivotal moment that the Flyers screwed up. I still wouldn't hold it against them. Like if he's there, to me, that has to be the pick. I just don't know how many teams are going to be willing to pass up on a talent like that. But it remains to be seen. And by the way, if you're the Flyers and you're gun shy about the possibility of going after Mishkov, given the fact that like the guy who was supposed to be your backup goalie this year, Ivan Fedotov, was sent to Siberia to go serve in the military, I wouldn't necessarily blame the Flyers if they said, yeah, we can't do that again. Now, that might be its own situation, and maybe that won't carry over in the case of Mishkov, but like I could understand being a little gun shy. But listen, you finished with the 7th worst record in the league. You had, a 36% chance of remaining there, or a 43%. You had a 36% chance of falling to number 8. There was an outside chance of falling to 9. And other than that, you had to hope and pray that you either jumped up to 2 or you jumped up to 1. It didn't happen. Chicago, I'll give you this unpopular opinion, and then I'll go to the phones. But like Chicago getting Bedard, for as much as it sucks and as much as everyone hates Chicago, that's better for the league than him going and dying in obscurity with Anaheim. It's certainly better. I mean, I think it's better than him going to Columbus. Chicago's at least a good hockey market. I don't like the Blackhawks. I don't necessarily like Chicago fans, but I do think it's good for the league that he went there. If that's where he's going to have to go, I guess that's going to work. I don't know what else you're going to do. I want to go out to you, though, because some people, and I'll ask anybody who wants to talk, I want to know if you were on the team tank or if you were on team let's figure this thing out. Culture matters. Torts as the culture guy matters. Hooray. I want to see. So if you want to talk, I guess hit the little button and we'll throw you on here. And I want to know if you were on team tank, if you were on team culture, if you're upset, if you're happy. We'll go out first to let's see. How do I approve this thing? All right. We'll go out to, where's he at? Whoa. We'll go out to Hollywood. So Hollywood, let me throw you on here. Hollywood, you're on the Twitter space after Bedard goes to the Blackhawks and the Flyers have number 7. Or not. It looks like Hollywood's gone. We have, maybe. Or not. All right. Let's see.
Russ.
Oh, there's Kyle Pagan.
First
Kyle
time,
Pagan.
Long time. Has anyone considered that Bedard can still fall to 7? I'll hang up and listen.
Shut up and go away. You know what, Pagan? If you go stand outside of the draft with video guy Craig and you harass every Chicago fan you can find at the NHL draft, then maybe. I don't think it's likely. All right, looks like Hollywood's ready. Hollywood, you're on the Twitter space. How are you doing?
How you doing? I mean, I'm okay. I mean, the part of this that hurts is that we lost out on Kane in 2007. Now, not that the Flyers were in a position to get the lottery pick. It's just that you go back and you see Chicago win the lottery pick again. It's like, wow, man. It just hurts.
It just feels like it's happening again.
It's not that it's happening again because the Flyers, they weren't the worst team. They weren't the worst team in the league. They were 22-40-12 in 2006.
Yep.
But now it's like they had a good March, so they kind of set themselves back, and they moved from 7, which is fine. But just seeing Chicago trade Kane, the last lottery pick they had, to New York, then get the lottery pick again, it's like, wow, it hurts.
So Hollywood, fess up. Were you a team tank or were you a team culture and see where the chips fall?
I was a team. As long as I'm paying to watch this team on my cable bill, I want to see them win. So I don't like the tank. The tank's bullshit.
Hollywood, you're part of the problem. Go away. I'm just kidding. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
Honestly, the tank mentality. Look where that's got the Sixers.
But look where it just got the Blackhawks. They actively tanked this year, and they now have the number 1 overall pick.
I know.
See, that's the thing. And listen, I've heard the Sixers argument. Like there have been months of the Sixers argument. I get it, and I would also just point, to the fact that one of the results of those tanks, and it's very different in the NBA. One player makes a much bigger impact than an NHL player does. But like that one guy just happens to be the now reigning MVP of the league. It's just this.
But they also picked Ben Simmons first overall. So
yeah, well, at the time he was a good player. He's a good player at the time. In fairness,
like when a kid says my favorite player is Sidney Crosby, it's like, oh shit, yeah.
You know what though? So thanks for hopping on. I have to say one of the things about that, when I saw the clip where Bedard said that he looks up to Crosby, he idolizes Crosby, I thought, you know what? As much as that's not going to land in Philly, it's a good answer. If Crosby had been a Flyer, he would have arguably been the most popular Flyer of the modern era. And there are obviously people who are going to argue Lindros would have been the most popular, would have been more popular. Or maybe you would have said, well, Bobby Clark is still the best Flyer of all time, and that's fine. Sidney Crosby is like the perfect embodiment of what a Philadelphia Flyer is supposed to be. Reckless abandon, likes to bitch, likes to complain, likes to draw the cheap foul. Also wins. Maybe that's why he's not meant to be a Philadelphia athlete. But like Bedard saying Crosby is fine. Like if if I were watching, I don't know, the Cowboys were drafting a quarterback and they said, well, who do you look up to? And the guy said like, well, I idolize Tom Brady and I do everything that Tom Brady does. Well, I'd say that's probably a good start. Even if you don't like Tom Brady or even if you don't like the Cowboys, well, you want your top player to, go and try to encapsulate and kind of embody the ideals of one of the best players to ever play the game. Let's see. We've got a request out there from Andrew. Andrew Woodmeyer, come on in. Let me know what you're thinking, what you're feeling on this beautiful Monday, May evening.
Hey, Russ, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So I was Team Tank all the way, and I have one question. I don't remember what was the punishment for all the scandals up in Chicago? Did they just get a slap on the wrist and said carry on and be the top market, or did they get something actually warranted of what they did?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I can look it up here, but the main thing is like they obviously didn't face any kind of a significant draft hit, right? So
because that was 2 years ago, so theoretically they could have lost.
They could have lost picks, or they could have lost a pick. I want to say they had didn't they have $1 million fine? Unless I'm conflating that with another.
What's that?
Yeah, I mean,
write a checkbook.
Yeah, man, that is true. Again, that's why you say, like everybody kind of goes back to that the hockey gods, and like I know that we're all saying it in jest, right? Like unless you really are a polytheist for hockey gods, but like the idea that there's going to be a karmic payoff here. I mean, Chicago winning it is about the worst thing that could have happened from the karmic side. But like, again, for the league, it's a good thing. Bedard going to Chicago is a great thing for the league. But, conversely, you can also make the argument it's not a good thing for the league because Chicago is one of three teams that actively went into this season, gutted their roster, traded off good young players, including Alex DeBrincat, actively tried to lose to get this pick, and it worked. Now, as a league, you might have to sit back and say, well, shit, how do we avoid this happening? How do we avoid becoming the new NBA? That's a problem.
Let's also not forget during that whole scandal, their owner actively was berating reporters and season ticket holders during the whole thing, saying you don't know anything. Just basically shut up and pay me while I do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a fair point. Thanks for hopping on. All right, now there's another Andrew here who I think I gave approval to hop on here. I don't know if he's able to now or not. Said he requested. I tried to honor the request. It's not coming through. I'm not sure why. I'm going to go to, let's see. Here we go. Andrew, let's see if that lets you in now.
I'm good.
Now there's another Andrew. It says requested, but I don't know. It's not popping up.
Hey, Russ, while you're waiting for Andrew to get on, I got one more question. Do you think
Go ahead.
the fact that Danny Briere couldn't control his child under his roof, who was about 20 years old, the NHL didn't want to give him Connor Bedard if he couldn't control him as a 17-year-old player? I'll hang up.
No, he's also not 17. Okay. Let's see. I saw it looked like Spencer was trying to get in. Now for some reason it looks like I don't know, I'm trying to add people back in here who requested to get in, and it's not letting me let people in now, which is weird. All right, let me do this. Andrew Woodmeyer and Spencer, I'm going to cancel out your requests. Try to re-request. I see other people who also are listed as speakers want to speak, so if you want to hit the request button, I can add you in that way. We'll see if that works. For some reason, it kind of booted a few things out. I'm not totally sure why it looks like that crapped out. Let's see. Andrew, I keep trying to add you in, and it will not let me add you. Maybe hop out and then hop back in. Let's see. There are, 6 other people here that sent over a... let me see if I can add... While I try to figure out why Twitter Spaces decided to not let more people in to talk. You can let me know, by the way, in a tweet, if for some reason you don't want to hop on and offer your voice on this one. There have been a lot of tweets coming in to the space So SMMS79 asks, any chance Mishkov is there? Feels like a possibility suddenly. I think that there is, but again, like you have to look at the teams now that are going to be ahead of the Flyers, and then look at the tenure of their current executives, because a GM or a president of hockey ops at this point for one of those other teams is not going to take the calculated risk and roll the dice at, say, number 4 or number 5 to take Mishkov if he isn't going to come over for 3 or 4 years, if ever. Now, if you have somebody, the reason the Flyers could make sense is because the Flyers, with a new GM, with a soon-to-be new president of hockey ops, with a relatively new coach in the organization, they have the latitude now. They do have the ability now to assess the situation and to say, you know what, like if this organization has done the right thing in hiring us, we should have 3 years to see if Mishkov comes over. And by the way, you can do one of two things. If you're Danny Briere and company going into next year, you can take this one of two ways. You say, we really don't think that we're as good as Chuck Fletcher thought we were last year. We're going to sell off some of the veteran players that we can that are good players. We might have to make a couple of tough decisions on some of the younger players. And you try to put yourself in that bottom 4 mix again for next year. Now, if Mishkov falls, to me, that's easily the way to go, because at that point you sit back and you say, we think he'll be here in 3 years. We can be bad another year. And then not this upcoming season, but the one after that. Then you start to push all right, now we're a good young team. We have a good young nucleus. Now we start to build. Now we start to actually make that transition to being a team that tries to contend. If Mishkov's not there and you're looking at one of these non-4-star players, available, then I don't know. Then you really have a tough decision on your hands. Now it looks like Andrew, the thing popped up and it went away again. I see more people. There we go. It looks like Alex just unmuted. Alex went away. All right. Those of you who are listed as speakers, if you want to hop in here, you can. Andrew Woodmeyer. There we go. There you are. There you are.
I think this is like the most frustrating result possible. There are other things. We have 2 teams in a division with high-profile Russians. I don't know what you think about Fantilli, but if the Caps get the number 2, they have Ovechkin to speak for them. If they think that Michkov, is the better player, they could probably get him over. So I could see the Pens with Evgeny Malkin doing the same thing. If they jumped up to 4, so it's not even technically the worst thing to happen to us. It's just the most frustrating. They go and cover up a sexual abuse scandal, and what is it? The year or maybe the second year they start a rebuild, they get the next generational talent.
Yeah,
it's just nonsense.
And I think that's what maybe compounds this more than anything. I mean, were you team tank or were you team culture and see where the chips fall?
I think culture is fine when you have the players in place, but if you want to go ahead and set the top half of a lineup, who are you slotting in where? We don't really have those guys. I want to build the culture with those players. If you traded
that is what that is a hedge. That's a hedge. Pick a side. There's no middle ground here.
You have to tank to get the players, then set the culture.
Okay.
Right,
yeah,
at the very least,
I don't disagree with you.
Even if you don't want to tank, you still have to go and look at it realistically with all these veteran players and be a year ahead. I think Banner for the Eagles used to do that all the time, where you would have high-profile veteran players and he would let go of them a year ahead of time instead of a year late. Do something like that. Have some foresight. Everybody knew what was coming. Like, we all knew Bedard's name, 2 or 3 years ago at this point?
Yep.
Just
I mean, it was. I think it was actually.
It's like you're living under.
It was actually longer than 2 years. He's 17 now, and if I remember correctly, he was on the national radar as being like the almost inevitable number 1 pick as a 13 or 14-year-old. That's the thing that I think is what's so maddening, and it's hard because, here I am, right? Like as one of these people who kind of beat the drum about where this team was heading with Chuck Fletcher in charge, and like he's gone, right? So you can't even aim your anger at somebody who's currently in power because they're not here anymore. But it's just that here's the last ramification, right? Well, and it's really not the last because there are some bad contracts that were given out. The Travis Sanheim 8-year deal that, like, if you wanted to try to move off of is going to be, incredibly difficult to move. But this is like your final swan song of the Chuck Fletcher era. That, like, this is what you as an organization allowed to happen by letting this guy execute what he considered to be a plan that was a plan to nowhere. You've known for years Connor Bedard is out there. He was widely considered for the last 3 years to be the next generational talent, akin to a Sidney Crosby or to a Connor McDavid. It was right there. This is the thing is, Connor Bedard is not a guy who just showed up one day and had a great combine at the NFL, right? Like, that's not what this is. He's not a guy who just came out of nowhere and started playing really well in the last 18 months. He's a guy that has long been considered a generational talent. So as a front office, as an organization, you have to sit back at some point and say, how do we get that kind of top-end talent? And if we don't have it right now on our roster, what do we do to get it? And this team lied to itself. This former president of Hockey Ops lied to himself, to the organization, to the people who made the decisions. Yes, they had some bad injuries. Yes, that's unfortunate. This team was never good enough. And that's also what made the Tortorella hiring just so maddening, because you sit back and you go, all right, well, I mean, shit, if we go back, if I were to pull up Snow the Goalie from last summer, right before the season, and I looked at it and I looked up what I said and what Bundy said especially, right? We said, we laid out the roadmap. The team is not good enough to contend for the playoffs. The team, because Tortorella is the coach and is going to raise their floor, is going to be too good to be horrible. Too good to be one of the top 3 picks in the draft. Well, look what happened. I mean, it doesn't even matter that they won the last 2 games of the season. Like, it played out exactly how we thought it would. And it sucks because you're out there as a Flyers fan, right? If this is the only team in the city that you support, right? You don't support the Eagles or the Phillies or the Sixers. You don't at least follow them. Maybe you follow them in the playoffs and root them on. But if this is it for you, and there are people who are like that, this sucks. Like, this is even worse because this was your best chance to get that generational talent, and it's gone. And not only is it gone, but now it's going to freaking Chicago. I think that's what makes it worse. All right, let's see. There's a request out there. Phil on finance. You are now live. How are you doing tonight? Are you excited? Are you sad? Are you angry? How do you feel? Phil, are you there? Phil on finance. Phil was there. Phil requested. Phil was approved. Phil has not hopped on. I see other people who have the speaker thing next to them. If you're out there and you want to speak. Oh, there we go. Phil.
Yeah, sorry.
Phil, how are you?
It's just par for the course. It's just sad. I mean, at the best case scenario, they were going to be maybe a bubble team to get into the playoffs, and that was the best case scenario. And just looking at where they were trending, team tank all the way. I mean, the teams that did tank, like Chicago, they got rewarded.
Yep.
We are not going to be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what happened across this league, Anaheim, for the most part, was in a tank or a quasi-tank. Arizona, to some extent, was also in tank mode. Now, Arizona didn't end up benefiting, right? They had the shitty thing, I guess, if you're an Arizona fan, is that 2 points was the difference between you and the number 5 pick. If you look at it, right, like the 4 teams that finished with the top 4 picks in this draft, they were far too far behind for the Flyers to catch, given what they were and some of the runs they went on this season. Like, we were sitting there pulling our hair out, like, yeah, culture is great. Yeah, you want the young guys to get to experience winning. And yes, you want Tortorella to instill the values that you need to be a winning team, but at the same time, you're on a road to nowhere. It's a fast track to a brick wall. You look at it, San Jose, like, they were another one of these teams that were trying to lose out, right? They ended up with 60 points. Columbus at 59, Chicago 59, Anaheim 58. Like, the worst of the worst were very clearly the worst. It is mind-numbing and it's maddening. It looks like there was somebody else who wanted to hop on and talk. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Third pick. Or getting the third pick, do you think that we can still trade Hayes to them, or is that off the table now?
I mean, here's the thing. This is what made me angry about the Hayes thing, right? So we go back to the trade deadline. we do our trade deadline special, and Anthony comes on, and he does the Anthony Insider thing, and he says, well, teams work out deals, and sometimes you work out those deals at the trade deadline to execute them in the summer. And while that's true, there were two things about that pissed me off, and probably should have pissed you off too if it didn't. The notion that Chuck Fletcher felt comfortable enough to try to negotiate a summer deal, given where the team was heading, is fucking crazy, right? There's no other way to put it. It's nuts. And beyond that, why didn't Columbus want to execute the trade midseason? They were tanking. They were trying to finish in the top three, the top four, where a star player was going to be. They didn't want to have the possibility of Kevin Hayes coming in, playing well with Johnny Gaudreau and raising their floor, or getting them in a position to fall out of the number one spot, which they ultimately did, or fall out of number two, which they did. But that was part of it. They also didn't want to pay money. That's fine. They didn't want to take on the contract. I get that. That makes sense, and that's totally fine. But that's part of why I would get so angry when thinking about Chuck Fletcher's this Ivy League educated guy. And he's trying to execute a trade months in advance when he shouldn't be here, and then also is trying to negotiate with a team that knows better and is smart enough to say, no, we're not going to execute this trade until the summer. We for very clear reasons that are tied to tanking. So, the end of that tenure and the last few months, especially last year, and someday maybe we'll be able to pull back the curtain on a little bit. But there were just a bunch of things that happened at the end of Fletcher's tenure that I don't know how he lasted as long as he did. But other teams benefited, so there's that. Now, I still see there are some other people out there that have hit the speaker thing. If you want to talk, by all means, I want to kind of gauge where everyone's out there. If you were team tank, if you were team, what the hell they call it, culture, and let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to go through some tweets here while some people, hit the request. Just hit the request to speak, and I'll add you in. TLM 1087 says on Twitter, who seriously is surprised Chicago got number one? I'll comment no further, whatever. Flyers Jabroni says bullshit ass NHL. Let's see. Gus, in Gus we trust, says the Makar drop and he'll drop past us, book it. So I threw out this idea on Twitter, I think just before the Spaces started. Can the Flyers get the Makar of this draft? I'm not saying that that's Mishkov. Mishkov is already, I think, a higher regarded player than Makar was when he came out. But the idea is Makar wasn't one of the guys in contention for that number one or number two overall pick. And he falls, and then he ends up being the best pick of that draft. You almost at some point want to see the Flyers get that player, right? The one that nobody sees as being in contention for a top two spot. He falls to 7 and ends up, being, if he's not Bedard, if he's not the Bedard level player, then at least he's able to be, a star player where you say, wow, at number 7, that was incredible value. I don't know how he fell. Let's see. There was another one on here. Give me a second. Alec McCloskey says they finally lose Taves and Kane and they get rewarded with Bedard. Sounds like the NHL needed to save that market. Left Coast Flyers says Putin has a save before Briere, referring to the Mishkov fall. Tyler Heath says completely aligned with the sentiment. This was the year to suck. Recent history of the number 7 overall pick from BJ Beretta, longtime listener and viewer of Snow the Goalie. By the way, I didn't do any of the shameless plugs that I usually do at this point. Snow the Goalie, Illinois Flyers podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Pandora. Also, the Snow the Goalie YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Snow the Goalie. You have to do a little @ Snow the Goalie. Subscribe there, hit the little bell notification thing, pound that subscribe, hit that subscribe, whatever, and you'll find out anytime we have a live stream or a new episode. This, by the way, this Twitter space will go up. So if you've missed any of it in the first 28 minutes or so that we've been going at it here, I'm in the process right now. Nobody can see it, but there's a stream recording thing going on right now. So I'll eventually edit this and throw it up on the YouTube channel as well. But BJ says, here are the number 7 overall picks. Eklund, Holtz, Cousins, Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Anderson, Keller, Provorov in 2015. Maybe you've heard of him. Hayden Fleury, Nurse, Dumba, Shifley, Skinner, and Kadri. There are good players on that list, right? There are good players. There are some very good players on that list. And I guess you could make the argument that if you can get one of those high caliber number 7 overall picks, that we've seen over the last decade or so, then you're in great shape. By the way, I want to listen, I'm going to shout this out right now, okay, because I just got the email notification. Alec McCloskey just subscribed to the Snow the Goalie YouTube channel. I just got the email. Alec McCloskey took it that seriously. Just went over to youtube.com/@snowthegoalie and subscribed. Alec, here's to you. Kudos. Let's get back to people who might want to say something here. We have W. Broody. Oh, wait, W. Broody was there, and now it fell off. Pagan wants to get back on. I don't know if I want to let Pagan back on here, but I'll go against my better judgment and let him talk for a second. Pagan, go ahead.
Hey, Russ. It's me again. First time, long time.
Yeah.
Big Snow the Goalie listener. I just subscribed to. Okay. Do you think the Flyers not congratulating Joel Embiid on his MVP award until an hour after every other Philly team did brought bad juju to the NHL lottery draft? I'll hang up.
I think it's a fair question. They were the last of the Philadelphia teams to acknowledge Joel Embiid winning the MVP. The Union put the picture of him with the Sons of Ben. I think the Phillies either quote tweeted it or they replied. The Flyers did, though. To their credit, they did. It was like an hour later, but they did congratulate the MVP. So there's that. J Toxic 49, you're unmuted, so I assume you want to talk. And if you don't, then I don't know. Then I've just shouted you out like a teacher calling out the kid in the back of the classroom. How are you?
No, I'm good, Russ. How are you?
I'm about as good as I think anybody's getting, right?
Look, I'm one of the loyal Snow the Goalie podcast listeners. You guys do a phenomenal job. I usually hate everything, but you guys do a great job. And
you're not living up to the toxic moniker here. That's
that's more of a play on my last name. But anyway, but we still got to hear that Bundy story. That I'm dying to hear the whole Bundy behind the scenes thing. I'm not letting that go. I want to hear it.
I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen. I would expect that it could happen as early as this summer, barring something. But
I know if he's allowed. It's a story. If he's back in the fold, he's not telling it. I get it. It's a story
that he wants to tell, and it's one of those things where, and I think this is fair game. I think I'm okay to say this. When you work on the Philly media side of things, and I'm like quasi detached from it now, right? Like I have not gone down and covered a Flyers game in over a year because I have 4 kids and I don't get paid to go down and cover the Flyers. I get paid to write about legal online sports betting. But like when you start to meet people behind the scenes in media, there are like 2 tracks you can go. Some people put their heads down. They don't want to know anything about what's going on at any of the news organizations or at the TV station, the radio stations. And I guess by virtue of like having done writing and such for Crossing Broad, like I have met a lot of these people. And you start to hear the way that NBC Sports Philadelphia has worked behind the scenes for years. Not like the last 18 months, but for years and years and years. And like, I don't understand how the channel's operational. I mean, you can make the argument that it's largely irrelevant, which I would say it probably is. The thing that I'm always interested to know now is like, who watches NBC Sports Philly outside of the game, right? Like, are there people who are actively sitting down and watching Sportsnet Central? Are there people who actively sit down and watch Birds Huddle or whatever the hell other show is going on? Like, do people still watch pre and post game and intermission? Like, I don't, and that's not trying to be, again, the asshole in the room. I don't watch it. There was a time where Philly Sports Talk, and before that Daily News Live, was like appointment TV. Like when I was in high school, 5 o'clock. Yeah. Daily News Live, TV. Like that's going on. I want to see Phil Jasner ripping into somebody. I want to see John Smallwood, kind of being miserable about something, but like still making a point. Marcus Hayes, and like you get Silsky and you get Berman, and like those shows were something that was worth watching. Sports Rise as a kid, right? Like Sports Rise, middle school, high school, Wake Up with Ron Burke or like a Neil Hartman or a Derek Gunn or a Leslie Goodell. Like you would do that and it felt like it was part of your day. You started your day with Comcast Sportsnet. You would end it with the games at night. You'd watch post-game live until it would like end and go to the World Poker Tour or whatever. Yeah. But like I don't think that happens anymore.
No,
You
and I
know?
think like the only thing I mean, I'll watch the Flyers, the intermission, and the post game, but like, and the Eagles post game used to be must see TV, but then they had that switch.
Yeah.
It's they're keeping. I don't know what Sally Jesse Barkan has on people there, but him and his blue glasses are way past their prime. But I mean, but anyway, I like I said, I'm also in a val. I hated Bundy when he played for the Flyers. I absolutely
Okay.
did. I didn't appreciate him. Let me put it that way. And I didn't hate
Okay.
I didn't hate him. I just didn't appreciate him. But when he made that turn to broadcast, I kind of I lived up to my moniker of toxic, being like, oh, this guy sucks. He was fantastic. He was awesome on TV. He totally turned me around. I love him now. And then hearing his other story, the personal struggles and everything like that, and how he's come through the other side, it just makes you feel great for the guy. And listen, if we don't get to hear that story this summer, that's because somebody in the Flyers actually has a fucking clue and brought him back into the fold somehow. You know what I mean? Whether it's on I know he said he doesn't want to go back to the radio, but he was great on the radio. But I loved him in between the boards, when he was in the studio, and when they put him with that stupid shit Colby Cohen. Like, who the hell? Like, I don't understand. Like you said, the Comcast Sportsnet shit, how that thing operates. And let's be honest, the only reason to watch a lot of that stuff was Taryn Hatcher anyway. But anyway,
Well, I'll tell you, Colby Cohen, who now works for the Blackhawks, is probably happier than anybody right now in the city of Philadelphia. So things came up pretty well for him. And just to clarify here, because you said a lot of nice things about the show in the beginning, which of course we appreciate. You were Team Tank, or were you Team Culture? Did we establish that? I don't remember.
No, we didn't. I'm sorry. We got on a couple tangents there, but good ones, I think. But I think I was Team Tank all the way. And just like Hextall and with Fletcher, these two guys when they were interviewed, they were overly contemplative. They didn't say much, so that made you think that they were real thinkers. And they both sucked. Hextall was the worst. And I'm really sad that Pittsburgh can't have that a couple more years. But anyway, but with Fletcher, like, why did we expect that a guy that couldn't run the team successfully could run a team unsuccessfully? Do you know what I mean? Like, like it was. Well, I listened to you guys all year long. And you were the same wavelength. But I was Team Tank all the way. I just, as soon as I saw that number 7 turn around, and it wasn't whoever was right in front of them, I was like, fuck it. They can't even lose. They can't even do this poorly. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like frustrating. And that's that. And by the way, thanks for hopping on. Thanks for all the kind words. Really do appreciate it. This, I think, is why we and I add myself back into the collective here now of like Flyers hive mind on the fan side of things, right? Like, you want to see your team do well. Everybody does. The biggest mischaracterization that exists out there is the notion that people who were like me, who thought this team needed to tank, were like the scum of the earth because we apparently actively wanted players to attempt to lose. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know who put that idea out in the periphery. Like, I don't know where that came from. You can't expect professional athletes to lose on purpose. It doesn't work. It can't happen, right? You have a desire to do well. If you're a veteran player, you want to, put yourself out there, good tape, to get yourself attention from a good team. If you're a young player, you want to actively fight for the chance to have a better contract. You can't get players to actively try to lose. But as the GM and president of Hockey Ops, you can certainly give your coach the tools or lack thereof to put yourself in position to be a bad team. You could have traded or attempted to trade some of your veteran players who are at least somewhat productive to try to bottom out. You could have potentially LTIR'd, players sooner. You could have potentially put some players on IR to shut them down. It's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh, shucks, this guy's hurt. He won't be back. They didn't do that. You could say it's commendable. I say it's idiotic, and ultimately this team's floor once again was too high for them to do any better than having this 7th pick. Spencer Chorney has requested to speak. Spencer, I think you should be able to now.
Am I on?
Spencer, yep, there you are.
Well, I heard Pagan was saying that is the Flyers' bad mojo because they didn't congratulate Joel Embiid's MVP, but I'll raise him one better. I think we're still waiting on that congratulations to Claude Giroux for 1,000 career points, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. Anyway,
does he owe the fans, by the way, that curated thank you that he said was coming that never came? Does that? No, okay.
I think it was a nice wave when he came back. That was nice.
Oh fuck yeah, the wave, absolutely.
Also, on the crossing broadcast, like Craig spins it 3 times. I think they only did it once, so I think you still got 2 more spins at this. So hopefully we can get that back. So everyone's saying like Chicago, big market, great market, but like let's not forget the fact that Chicago went 50 years without winning anything. Then they got lucky and got Patrick Kane, and then they won the 3 and 6 years, and then they traded all their good players for shit, and then it became a shit team. But is it really that good for the league that Chicago's that good? I mean, they were a dominant team for about 8 years in the past decade, and the NHL saw their ratings go down. They saw leagues like MLS like kind of catch them a little bit. So Chicago being a great team doesn't really do that much for the league. Honestly, what's going to do better for the league is teams like the Devils being good, the Rangers being good, the Islanders doing good. Like these East Coast teams being good is more important than Chicago. And I just think that people are giving Chicago a lot of credit. They're almost an anemic franchise when you think about it. They just had a good stretch because they got lucky in the lotteries, but all that. And then when you think about what's to come for Chicago, like they got lean years coming, a lot of bad years coming. But when you think of when players came to teams like when Crosby went to Pittsburgh, they already had drafted Malkin. They already had Fleury. And then McDavid, they already had Draisaitl in the system. Even when Matthews went to Toronto, they already had Marner in their system. They already had Riley in their system, I'm pretty sure. But like Chicago's got nothing. So there's gonna be a lot of lean years there where people are gonna be like, "Oh, Connor Bedard, like he got 70 points on a team that had like 50 wins, or 50 points." But I think people are like blowing Chicago's like ego up. They're not that great of a city to have a good team. We just saw it the last 10 years. The league is in a worse shape than it really was before they got all these good players. So
I'm going to credit you here on a very interesting line of thinking. I agree with some of it and I disagree with some of it, but I do like where your head's at. The one thing is I don't think that it's fair to necessarily pin the possibility of like Chicago being a good team and like trying to say that like that correlates with the league falling off. I think that's more it's more of a mechanism of like what Gary Bettman has done as the commissioner of the league. I think it has more to do with the fact that like this cap has been flat for 3 years and really isn't going to continue to increase in any meaningful way. It's locked a lot of teams that have bad rosters into maintaining bad rosters, and those with like middle of the road rosters like the Flyers into remaining there. Chicago is still a great sports city. So I think that no matter what, that ends up being a team.
Did you watch this Phillies play the Chicago White Sox?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The White Sox don't count.
Well, no one was there. It's not that
the White Sox. The White Sox don't count.
Well, I'm saying it's not that great. So fair, like, and also, okay, team tank, team rebuild. I'll just say this: the Flyers are okay. If they would have tanked, and let's say they end up like Columbus, like okay, they'll get a good player, but. And Columbus has players that are hurt, so they're kind of a weird example. But I think the Flyers are better off in the long run doing what they did than hoping they got this magic bullet, only because Forrester looked really good. Okay? Cam York looked better. Like, the young guys looked confident. Like, obviously, you want to straw that stirs the drink.
That mute button's starting to look attractive to me.
Well,
it's getting
obviously,
close.
Bedard would have been a straw that stirred the drink. Obviously. But if you mute me, I'll just say one thing. Okay? Alexis Giron, who's on Quebec Nordique, or the Gatineau Olympiacs, is a hell of a player. And we stole him in the 7th round. Now, I know what you're saying, I'm not going to rely on our future on a 7th round draft pick, but in our moment of sorrow that we're going to kind of get like maybe a third line player in this draft, look at those highlights. Guy had 50 goals, and he got traded halfway through the season. And he had, I think, 19 points in 14 playoff games. The same kind of thing that Claude Giroux had when he was in Gatineau. He's a hell of a player. He may be better than Connor Bedard. There, I said it.
Jesus. Okay. Spencer, thank you. There were some good things in there. Listen, come back in 2-3 years when he's playing for the Flyers and is a meaningful player and looks like he might be coming close to Connor Bedard. Save this Twitter space and throw this back in my face and anyone else who says anything negative about what you had to say. I see Ryan has raised a hand. Ryan, you should be able to, I think, unmute or hit request. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I think first of all, I was Team Tank all the way, but I think we have to go Sam Hinkie style and take the longest view in the room here. We're already probably too late to, take that path, but I don't think you're in a position where you can compound errors at this point. And I don't think the young core right now is talented enough and can develop into elite talent to compete for, a Stanley Cup. I think you have to kind of look now 5+ years into when our next, window will be. So I don't think that Briere can try and, build a team right now with the existing roster that will be able to compete in, less than 5 years, essentially.
So here's the issue that I have with the line of thinking. And I don't think that it's an asinine way to look at it. Okay. The problem is the Hinkie model works in the NBA because one player can fundamentally change the entire trajectory of a franchise. If you think about it, Hinkie's tank got the Sixers what exactly? Nerlens Noel out of the league, Jahlil Okafor playing for the Blue Coats. You eventually you got a, well, I was getting there. It got you Embiid, who fell because of a potential, the navicular bone fracture in his foot. And big men with that kind of injury typically did not do well. He also had the back injury just before the draft. So you had a lot of misfortune medically that allowed him to fall. And also the Bucks were moronic by taking Jabari Parker number 2. And then, after that you go, okay, they were in position and they were set up where when he was ousted, they ended up with the number 1 pick. They got Ben Simmons, who looked like an actual player until he lost it mentally. And you were also, again, in position to get a Markelle Fultz who forgot how to shoot a basketball. All that's to say, yes, in theory, you could try to go that way. But the likelihood in the NHL of that working is so slim. That's what made this year so much worse, because this was the year where there's a clear, defined generational talent at the top of the draft. This doesn't happen often. That's why they're generational talents. That's why they're so highly regarded. That's why a Sidney Crosby was looked at a certain way. A Connor McDavid was looked at a certain way. And Connor Bedard is looked at in that same vein. This is why, the whole idea, even if I could say, yeah, suck for 4 years, which they're not going to do. There's no way that Comcast is going to okay that. And I think it's also just really hard to try to suck for 4 years like that intentionally in the NHL. Even if you were going to try to say that, all right, what's the end goal? It's probably to try to get a player who's a generational talent. You had a chance. You've known for 3 years that this kid was going to be coming out and was likely trending to be a number 1 pick. You've known for over a year that your team wasn't going to be good enough to actually compete for the Stanley Cup, let alone the playoffs. And you chose to try to make a middling team, and that's what they did. So, your easy escape, or even to your point, if you were going to try to do a 5-year rebuild, this is the guy to get now, so that even if the team does suck next year and the year after, and you do end up with like 2 more top 10 picks or 2 more top 15 picks, you at least have that number one generational talent to build around and those guys to kind of fortify the rest of the roster. But because you chose to go the way that you did, you don't have that. And it makes rebuilding even harder, because as of right now, unless somebody has it like on the tip of their tongue, I don't recall there being somebody thought of in next year's draft or the year after that's being talked about in the same way that Bedard and McDavid and Crosby were. And if that's the case, then you're looking at, all right, we're going to suck this year, next year, the year after, and hope that, 4 years or 4 drafts from now, there's going to be another Bedard available. Well, I'm sorry, but if by the 4th year, you're still bad enough to be contending for that top 3 pick, something has gone horribly, horribly awry. Because just by virtue of Tortorella being your coach for at least 1 or 2 years, you add that to the fact that like you've got this supposed young core of players that is supposed to, eventually develop into something. If none of them develop and this team still sucks that badly in 4 years, you've committed one of those things that I like to come back to: organizational malpractice. That's a legitimate concern. So Ryan, thanks for hopping on. I saw there was another request out there. It just went away. If there's somebody out there who wanted to talk, I still see 5 or 6 people with the speaker designation. If you want to talk, hit the request button, and you should be able, I believe, to unmute if you want to hop in here. I see Mike and Colin and Rich and Anthony. I see a Carter Hart. I don't believe that's the real Carter Hart. Flyers Stink and Ray, all of whom have the speaker designation. If you want to get in, feel free. I'm going to go through some of the tweets while I wait to see. Oh, there we go. Colin. Colin has unmuted. Colin, your thoughts?
I'm sure you guys already talked about this. I was just trying to see if I heard wrong on the TV. They announced Chicago and Anaheim were the final 2 for that first pick. No?
Yeah. They did. Yeah, and that is going to be one of those things that if I'm a Columbus fan, I am raising hell. Not that it matters, but yeah, right before the commercial break, where they were going to the top 3, they said Columbus with the 3rd pick. They said Columbus with the 3rd pick, or they said that Chicago has jumped. It was one or the other. I believe they said Columbus will have the 3rd pick, which is the first motion that we've seen at the top of the board. And then they went to commercial. And they didn't reference that when they came back, which was very, very strange, to say the least.
I would definitely assume it's not rigged. I'm sure they just know the results before and they slipped up before the commercial break. But
yeah,
I think it was Frank said that he has an in-depth he was there in New Jersey when they did the drawings live, and he has like an in-depth video on Daily Face-Off tomorrow at like 2 p.m. So if anyone's worried about that, I figure that was just a good thing to put out there to show that it's not rigged. I mean, hopefully it's not, and I also agree with, I think his name was Spencer. Chicago's not that great of a market, but you win some, you lose some. We're still going to get a good player in the draft. I'm not terribly worried, but it obviously would have been really nice to have a top 3 pick.
I think it's a pretty rational way to look at it, Colin. I do. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate it.
Of course. Have a good night, Russ. See you, boys.
You too. And then I saw there are a few more people that still have the speaker thing. If you don't have the speaker designation yet and you want to jump onto this, feel free. I'm going to go through some of these tweets while wait and see if anybody else tries to hop on and have a chat. Chris, with a bunch of numbers after his name, says Kane will go back to Chicago. Wouldn't that be something? Mike Aceto says Dave Scott's ineptitude allowed this circus to continue for way too long. He let Fletcher execute a plan to nowhere, complete dump of a front office, zero planning ever. So over this dumb franchise. He's not alone in that. Manny comes in and says, thanks for doing this, the Twitter space. No problem. Happy to do it. Let's see. There was another thing here. Eric Holt says, I love the Flyers. Everything hurts. Rick Bucciarelli says they don't even know how to lose properly. The franchise is an absolute disaster. I had season tickets from 69 to 85. I'm embarrassed at how bad they are. This is interesting. So W. Broody asked, and I think W. Broody tried to jump on before as a speaker, but sent this tweet over. How does not getting Bedard or Fantilli change the Flyers offseason plan? More likely to see TK or Provorov or maybe Hart traded. It is an interesting question. Like, I know that there was that thought thrown out there. It was Brandon Summerman a while back put out the tweet about talking to a scout, and the scout saying, if you're the Flyers, like, do you take Bedard? Like, does that mess up your rebuild timeline because you're supposed to have other players in place before you add that kind of talent? I don't know how much it changes what the offseason is going to be. Like, look, I would be very surprised if Ivan Provorov is here to start next season. I would be very surprised. I don't see Konechny being moved. I think that he's a guy that Tortorella is going to want to build around. Konechny would fetch you something. He had, the best season of his career. He's a hardworking player. He's willing to get, to get dirty, to get in the crease. Like he's a good player, a well-liked guy. I don't see how you move on from that unless you are going to try to do an extended, breakdown. Because, like, if we apply for a second, and I fear doing this, but if we apply the Chuck Fletcher logic, right? Fletcher came on to Snow the goalie, a year and a half or 2 years ago. It must have been a year and a half ago. And when we talked to him about the decision to re-sign Scott Laughton before the trade deadline, so it was 2 trade deadlines ago, he said, well, look, we had 2 choices. We could either extend Scott Laughton, who we knew, who was part of this organization, who we knew fit with what we were trying to do. We could either extend that player, or we could try to trade him at the deadline and then still have to go out in the offseason and sign another Scott Laughton. And they ultimately chose to re-sign Scott Laughton. You could make the case, I guess, that if you really like Travis Konechny, and if Tortorella really likes Travis Konechny, and Danny Briere, who has worked with Travis Konechny, likes Travis Konechny, you're more likely to hang on to that guy because you know that he's bought into the process, he's bought into the coach's message, he's bought into all of that. There's not as much of an unknown variable, right, as going out and trying to find a 30-goal scorer that is going to do a lot of those things for you. If he could fetch them a good pick, then maybe. But are you going to get a better pick than number 7 for him? No, I don't see that being a thing. Provorov, I would imagine, has to be moved. Hayes, do you come back to the potential deal that Fletcher tried to strike with Columbus for the offseason? Again, the craziest shit ever. That Chuck Fletcher negotiating a deal for months down the line, thinking that he had job security, or at least being enabled to think that he had job security. All right, let's see. Carter, it looks like Carter is ready to talk. Carter, are you there?
Not the real Carter Hart, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm
a
not,
goalie from way back, so I'm
okay. All right.
So here's a crazy question, but you're the kind of guy who would like to answer this kind of question.
Okay.
Potential free agent signing, Shane Gostisbehere.
Get off. Just go.
Really? Okay.
Well, no. Okay, hold on. I won't. No, we're not gonna do the sports radio thing here. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Here's the only reason, and you're not going to play him 5,000 hours a game. He's like a number 2 power play guy for you, somebody who can give you some offense on a defensive point. Because I know Poverov's going to go, but we're going to get somebody more defensive, just because we need to become mean and nastier, I think. And I don't think there's going to be as much offense from the defenseman as we think there is. Thoughts? I don't know.
There's no chance. There's Ron Hextall is more likely to walk in and take over president of hockey ops. All right, maybe not that far. All right, but it's pretty close. Yeah. Like Shane Gostisbehere is not coming back. There are like 2 things. Like I think there are 2 things at play for that, right? Like one, he soured on the organization at the end, right? Like he actively was in a position where it made. I'm not saying that he hates this organization. I'm just saying that, like, by the end of his tenure, like, things had gotten kind of toxic, and like he was scapegoated in some ways. I don't think he was like some sensational player, right? And I don't think that he was like irreplaceable. But like, what are you doing? Like if say that, like, conceptually you go, all right, he could be our second power play unit, like the QB on the second power play. Well, like, what good is that going to do you, right? Like, you're not a bubble playoff team that's looking to get to the middle of the conference, right? That's not a guy that you bring in also to be part of like a rebuild. And like, I don't know about you, Tortorella coaching Gostisbehere. I mean, I don't see it. Good point. I just simply don't see it. But that's just me. I mean, you can be excited about the idea, I guess, But I do not see under any circumstances a scenario where that works out. Just not at all.
All right, that's the crazy idea for the rest of the night. So everybody's got to give good ideas. So,
and I mean no disrespect, but there's just no
I
way.
appreciate it, Rob.
There's absolutely no chance of that happening. But listen, if it does happen, I'm going to imagine that like you had an in with somebody in the organization. You have Danny Briere on speed dial, and then we're gonna have to come back here and try to figure out who not Carter Hart was. So. But no, it's a good question, and yes, I like the off the wall questions. Happy to answer those and see if we can figure something out. But no, I don't see that being an option. But thanks for checking in.
All right, take care. Cheers.
So let's see. I still see there are 6 or 7 people who have the speaker designation. If you want to hop in here, Rich, Anthony, Kevin, Dylan, Mike. If any of you guys wanted to hop in. By the way, if you're new to the space, if you just hopped in here at some point, wild numbers. Sam Filippo is the one who, when he does a Twitter space, he like puffs out his chest and he'll text me and Bundy and I got so many people on. So many people on at the same time. I'm rocking like 110 plus for the majority of the Twitter space. We're around there now. But that's nice. I appreciate people hopping on. Just to vent, to have a little chat. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the tweets really quick because there were a few that I thought were definitely interesting and I wanted to kind of touch on here. And we'll see if anybody else here wants to jump on and speak. Joseph Nassib says on Twitter, we're better off selling the team, getting an expansion team. We will have a chance to win the cup. There's not one flyer who makes you want to buy a ticket. Not one. That, I think, is one of those things that's going to be really, really, really difficult to come up. Like if we're being honest, that is an issue that this team is going to have. There is no player right now that people actively want to spend money to go see. You could want to go see Carter Hart play. Are you going to spend hundreds of dollars to pay for your family to go see just Carter Hart play? Maybe. Could you really like Travis Konechny and want to go see? Yeah. But you don't have that star level player or that face of the franchise that you want to go out and watch play night in and night out. Still, your most recognizable person is the coach of the team. And your second most popular or second most famous person on the team is the soon-to-be removed interim tag GM. Like, that's it. You don't have that star-level player. You don't have that draw. I think that's the shame. And, like the hockey ops side, the previous regime, put the business side in a bad position because it's almost impossible to try to figure out how you're going to market this team. But that's neither here nor there. Like that's not something that we really need to be, I guess, totally concerned with. Tragic Apple on Twitter asks, what are the chances they trade up in the draft? I don't know, but I don't know how you make a deal. So if we look at this really quickly and if we recap where this team ended up at number 7. All right, so 6 was Arizona, 5 is Montreal, 4 is San Jose, 3 is Columbus, 2 is Anaheim, 1 is Chicago. Obviously, Chicago's not going to trade out. I don't think Anaheim would either. You have to then sit down and say, all right, like which of these teams is most likely to be interested in any way, shape, or form by one of the young players that we have or young-ish players we have? They don't have an up-and-coming superstar, right? So Forster might be a good player. He might have a great shot. He might be somebody that people want to believe in as being somebody who could be a piece going forward. But he's not a move up to number 3 or a move up to number 4 piece. Ivan Provorov is not the guy who's going to get you to jump 3 or 4 spots. Travis Konechny probably isn't the guy to get you to jump 3 or 4 spots. After the season he had, Travis Sanheim is certainly not the player who's going to get you up 3 or 4 spots. So if you add all those things up, I don't know how you could trade up. I don't know what team is going to, want to actively try to move up or allow you to move up in this draft. I just don't. That's not to be negative. It's just I don't see the pieces with this team to put you in that position. Who is Mike Mall says, how can a team that needs high-end talent have no plan to actually acquire high-end talent? This is a team going nowhere, and I don't know they have much more runway with the fans going down this path with no superstars in sight. The only counter to that is that they made the wholesale change at the top of the organization. If this team had been stupid enough to keep Chuck Fletcher in power through this draft and through this offseason, I would totally agree. The fans, to some extent, are going to give Danny Briere at least some leeway. They're going to give him some breathing room. That was the thing that never made sense to me about Fletcher in the first place was, like, as an organization, you know that the fan base at large hates the guy running the show. You aren't giving yourself any benefit of the doubt, and the fans aren't going to show you grace because the guy who's run the thing into the ground continues to be employed. In this case, Briere was a popular player. The coach is popular with the fans. The fans are probably going to give them some time to try to turn it around. The question is, can you execute that plan? And can you add that top-end talent that Fletcher was woefully inept at adding? And in fairness, Ron Hextall was as well. I mean, there's not an elite player on this team. You can make the argument there's not a single player on this team. I'm going to be careful here. There's not a single player on this team who's top 5 at their position. And you could maybe even make the argument that the Flyers don't have a single player on their team who's top 10 at their position. There are people who are going to probably jump on like Carter Hart. Maybe you could make that case. Maybe. I need to see it for another season before I would join you in like the definitive, top whatever. But like none of their defensemen are a top 10 defenseman in the league. None of their forwards are a top 10 are a top 10 forward in this league. They're just not. I'm looking here again. I see a few people that have the speaker designation. If you want to talk, you can unmute or you can hit the request button. I'll be happy to let you on and share your thoughts. Most of the people, it seems like, who have jumped on and who have talked were pro-tank. But we did have a couple of people who, kind of preach the, we'll see where the young core is at. Looks like Jake is ready. Jake has a bag on his head in his Twitter avatar. So I have a feeling I know where Jake is gonna go with this. But Jake, if that is your real name, what are your thoughts on this fine night?
So I actually was not I was a complete tank, but I was in like, you got to fix the culture because I felt like they were completely off the ship. They had no connection whatsoever to the city, and I felt like you kind of got back, but you did it way too late, and they should have been doing this. Like when you look back at the teams that were supposed to be good, it's like there's no way when you look back that team was going to be anywhere. Like there was no way that we were going to be good and like or go into some sort of deep playoff run. We just got hot and then we fizzled out.
But hey, I don't want to interrupt you, Jake, and I'm going to throw this right back to you in a second. There's like quasi-breaking news. It's not good necessarily, but Darren Ravel just put out that in the first hour after getting the number 1 overall pick, the Blackhawks have now sold $1.9 million in season tickets. In the first hour after it was announced that they got the number 1 overall pick, which will be Connor Bedard. $1.9 million worth of season tickets this year sold within an hour. They had the 3rd lowest capacity percentage in the NHL this year. So the people who earlier on the space were saying Chicago's a shitty, hockey town or sports town because they didn't show up. I mean, fair, they tanked this year. But almost $2 million in season tickets have been sold in the first hour after the Blackhawks got the number 1 pick. Imagine if you're Dan Hilferty taking over the Philadelphia Flyers as CEO or taking over Spectacor. You're going to oversee the Flyers. Or if you're Valerie Camillo on the business side, or you're insert name of president of Hockey Ops, you may or may not have already interviewed for the job recently. Boy, would you like to have put yourself in position to have $2 million in season tickets in the first hour? So Jake, back to what you were saying.
I was gonna buy a jersey if I was planning on buying either Fantilli or Bedard. I was like, all right, let's go. Especially with the new jerseys like coming out. But yeah, no, they should have been. The process should have been started years and years ago. And Fletcher was a complete. I mean, I didn't need to be a dead horse, but like he was a complete dumpster fire. But moving forward, if I'm Danny Briere, I'm looking. All right, I gotta try. If we got Bedard, then I think Hayes and Provorov are gonna get moved no matter what. But now if I'm Danny Briere, you're like, all right, we're probably gonna be good. We're probably gonna be looking at a deep playoff run in 5 years, maybe 5 to 7 years. Konechny will be a bit older, but he'll still probably be like a player by then. it's like, why not maximize his value now and get something good for him? It's going to hurt because now you just lost the one player that I think fans like really, really like. And you got Tippett, but I mean, Tippett's a third line guy. Forster and Brink might be second line guys, but you also have an overload of right wing right now. So I mean, if you could maybe move up, like if you put Konecny with like the 7th pick and move up to 6 or 5, because I think Will Smith, I do like Will Smith, and him playing with Gauthier, I think that could have some good chemistry when they come over to, if we get Will Smith, when they come over to the Flyers. And I don't know if you saw the interview that he did with Gauthier and this. I don't know who they were, but I saw it on Twitter. And I mean, I can't wait to see him actually play. Thank you, though.
Absolutely. This is the shame. I think when you look at it now, like you can't even get yourself excited about what star player or star caliber player you have coming. You can't get yourself hyped up watching videos about Connor Bedard or about a Fantilli or about a Mishkov. Like you don't have that ability, because at 7, who's there and who's there to be excited about? It's almost like another buzzkill. You know, it's like another layer to this where you're just like, man, like it would have been good to just have one thing break the right way for this team, and it hasn't happened. Intimidator 21 says this could have been the Flyers. This is about the $2 million of season tickets being sold in the first hour for the Blackhawks. This could have been you, Flyers, but you got those character building wins. You know, the thing about that, and we need to be fair. Culture matters, right? It does. Culture absolutely matters. But there's another thing that matters as well. And the thing that matters is having good talent. This team, talent-wise, has a ton of question marks. And you really have to hope that a team and an organization that have not done an exceptional job of developing their talent and developing their picks is going to somehow, I don't know, churn out, A quality players with B or C quality draft picks, right? I haven't seen it yet. Maybe Danny Briere comes in here. They lift the interim tag. They hire this new president of hockey ops. Remains to be seen who that will be. But perhaps Danny Briere goes out and he makes a few changes, or he makes wholesale changes, and we see an overhaul of the coaching staff at the AHL level. Maybe we see an overhaul of the scouting department. We see an overhaul of more of the front office. And maybe at that point we say, you know what? We have to give these people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they will be able to find the diamond in the rough. Maybe they will be able to find the needle in the haystack. But again, boy, would it have just been nice for once to be able to sit back and say, here's the excellent player. Here's the generational talent. We got him. We can't say that tonight. We can't even say we're going to get the second best or the third best or the fourth best player in the draft. Right now, the only thing you can hope for is that this team somehow is able to draft a player that no one considers to be the best or second best or third best player in the draft, and they fall to 7, and we look back on it a decade from now and say, how the hell did that guy fall? Like Makar did. But I'm not holding out hope. I don't know if anybody will be. It's almost impossible to do it. Let's see. Oh, do we have is Colin rejoining? Colin?
I never left. I was listening quietly. I just had a quick question. How do you feel about the Russian falling? Because obviously there's stuff going on, and I could see him falling, but I don't think the Flyers would take him if he fell there. I feel like it would go right past us, and he'd end up in Washington again.
So here's one thing that I can tell you. When Chuck Fletcher was here, he had no interest, none, zero, in being presented with the potential of Mishkov falling. He wanted nothing to do with him. I think part of that is because he realized he only had a certain shelf life. And again, that's where I think Briere is able potentially to make the most of having a start of his tenure coinciding with this pick, rather than being 2 or 3 or even 4 years into his tenure. Because you can take that gamble and you can try to rebuild this thing this year, or you could try to race to the bottom for next year, or to be in contention for one of those top picks next year. And if Mishkov comes over in 3 years, well, then cool. you potentially got the best player in the draft. Like, remember, going into this year, or a year and a half ago, pre-Russia, Ukraine, there was the thought that Mishkov any other year would have been the number one pick in this draft. And the one thing that over the last 18 months has kind of held him back as being, if not one, definitely two, is what's going on and the possibility that he doesn't come over. If you're the Flyers, it's totally understandable to be gun shy, right? Because of what's happened with Fedotov. And it doesn't mean that every Russian player is going to be, held and held back by the KHL or held back by the Russian government or whatever the hell happened, right? But it's understandable if this organization looks and says, like, we can't trust that we're going to be able to get this player over. Maybe they will. Like, maybe we're all wrong. Like, I don't know. Maybe the thing with Fedotov is we don't know. We don't really know anything about what happened. We don't really know his side. We don't know, I guess, the Russian government's side. Not saying that anybody's right. Just saying we have gone off of speculative reports. But, like, do those same circumstances apply to a Mishkov? I don't know. I mean, I don't know Mishkov. I don't know his family. I don't know his agent. So we just know that he's under contract to the KHL for another 3 years. And it's very unlikely that they're going to allow him to break out of that contract. The Washington thing is more interesting because you've got Ovechkin there. And Ovechkin, Putin, there seems to be a cordial relationship. Perhaps it would be, viewed as Mishkov could be the next, great Russian player playing in America. It can change the narrative, like all that. But the Flyers don't have that guy. They don't have that guy to kind of play the bridge, if you will. So could Mishkov fall to 7? It's possible. Will he?
Yeah, I doubt it. It was just a thought.
Yeah. I'm going to go back over to some of the questions, comments, and concerns over on Twitter. There are still a few people that I see here with speaker designation. If you're new into the space or if you've been sitting here the whole time, patiently waiting and thinking to yourself, there's nothing I would like to do more than jump on here and air out my thoughts, my comments, and concerns. You certainly can do that. You can hit the request to speak, or you can unmute and we can have a chat. But I do want to go back over to a couple of the things that have been tweeted over here. A lot of people tagging me and Anthony and Bundy and Snow the Goalie about Blackhawks first hour after Bedard, after the number one pick goes to Chicago, and it's clearly going to be Bedard, $2 million worth of season tickets sold. Insane. Absolutely insane. Jared, Wolf's Jetta 12 says, so tired of hoping we can develop prospects into stars. It has never happened. Save Us Danny B says, we also don't have the best track record in the draft. And then I got tagged in. So Briere came out with a statement, as you would expect him to, as the interim, but not really, interim GM. I'm excited for our 7th overall selection in this year's NHL draft. This selection is the first step needed to usher our organization into a new era, and I'm looking forward to welcoming our next group of prospects into the Flyers family. That was from Danny Briere. We'll point out, Briere is a very bright guy, smart guy. Tortorella has noted on many occasions just how brilliant of a hockey mind he believes Briere to be. They're going to be in lockstep. And that president of hockey ops job that we've talked about on Snow the Goalie, like that is going to be a figurehead job. I see absolutely no indications that this is supposed to be the person to come in and oversee the day-to-day hockey ops being run by Briere and Tortorella. This really does feel like they're trying to go for more of a PR move, and they're trying to go for somebody who's not going to necessarily be involved on that end. It might just be more of a forward-facing and maybe more present president of hockey ops, not off in the shadows, not kind of working the strings like the marionettes, right? But that this person might just kind of influence things but be more forward-facing, more out with public initiatives, maybe more face-to-face with season ticket holders and maybe at games. Not even saying that that's a bad idea. Honestly, I don't know at this point. Before we head out here, because this went on, I thought we were going to do about 10 or 15 minutes, but we had roughly, I don't know, like 100-ish people, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. I think we're at 85 right now. We're an hour and 20 minutes almost into a Twitter space that was supposed to be 10 minutes. I have to I told my wife that it was going to be a short Twitter space, and here we are, an hour 20 later. If there's anybody out there who still wants to offer their thoughts, I'm happy to have that chat. In the meantime, I will point out, as I did at some point, as I often do, make sure if you're not already following Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, you do so. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Pandora, anywhere you get your podcasts, find Snow the Goalie, a Flyers podcast. By the way, if that's just too much, all right, if you're sitting there and you're just like, this is too hard, you can ask, I'm not going to say the name, but the thing on the iPhone or your iPad or your Mac, or the thing, the thing with your Amazon device or the thing with your Android device, if you ask your digital assistant to play the most recent episode of Snow the Goalie of Flyers podcast, that will happen. It'll happen automatically. We'll ask you that, you hit subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave a 5-star review. 5-star ratings are great, but 5-star reviews where you say nice things, like that's swell as well. And then on Spotify, if you click on the page just below the logo, there's like a little star rating. You can click on that and you can leave 5 stars, and that's great. And the big thing, the big push that we've done the last month or so is the Snow the Goalie YouTube channel. So typically we put all the episodes on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel, but we've started to kind of migrate to our own channel. So that's youtube.com/Snow the Goalie. So if you're not subscribed there, please make sure that you do. The last time I put that out to the people here in the Twitter space, we picked up 2 more subscriptions, which might seem like nothing, but to me, it means everything. So if you can, go to youtube.com/@Snow the Goalie, and you can subscribe there. I think at this point, it doesn't look like there's anybody else who's trying to jump on. Listen, thank you for tuning in. At this point, we just kind of have to, trust whatever's going to happen happens. It's a new regime. It's a new set of people that are going to be trying to make the decisions and make this team better. They were dealt a pretty rough hand. It's a shame. It's a bummer to not get one of the top 4 picks in this draft or get one of the top 2 picks in the draft. It hurts more to watch Chicago after all of what's happened with them, watch them get the number 1 overall pick, but it happens. Now we have to see where this thing goes. And if I'm doing the math correctly, we are just under 51 days away from the NHL draft. I'm sure we'll be doing something with Snow the Goalie, whether it's in person or if it's virtual. We'll probably be doing something for the draft, so keep an eye out for that. I think at some point, if not this week, then probably next week, we'll be back with an episode of Snow the Goalie, regular episode, reacting to the playoffs and probably reacting to some of what happened here with the draft lottery and how things are shaking out from that point. So, again, a huge thank you to all of you who tuned in, all of you who asked questions or voiced your concerns. Even the person who brought up somebody from I think it was Gatineau or something and said that like the 7th round pick might end up being as good or better than Connor Bedard. Like even to that person, I say thank you. And we'll be back at some point here in the next week or so with a new Snow the Goalie. But until then, you can interact. Follow me on Twitter @JoyOnBroad. You can find the podcast on Twitter @Snow the Goalie, Facebook.com/@Snow the Goalie. Also now on TikTok @Snow the Goalie. There's like one video from Anthony touching the mic. It was weird. We're going to start putting out some of the clips. And I say we, I mean me. I'll start putting out the clips, some vault clips. We have that interview from a long while back with Danny Briere. I think that was during the summer of 2020, where he told the story of how shocked the team was when Mike Richards and Jeff Carter were dealt. There's a lot of good stuff from that. So I kind of want to, I don't know, maybe dig some of that stuff back up. We'll put that out through not only TikTok, but also on Facebook and Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels. So expect a lot of content that way, a lot of video content, stuff from the vault this summer. We're working on some other fun stuff and some cool things. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great night. And remember, it could always be worse than the 7th pick.